Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar, How Tech-Enabled Traceability Will Transform Safety and Quality Operations. Our webinar is hosted by iFood Decision Sciences and Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. But before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you after the webinar. So be on the lookout for an email from us sometime tomorrow. And we also welcome your questions, and we will be answering them at the end. So throughout the webinar, feel free to enter your questions into the Zoom Q&A feature. That's at the bottom of your screen, and we'll address them after the presentation. So next slide, please. So today, you're going to hear the expert perspective of two industry veterans. I'm delighted to introduce our presenters, Minos Athanassiadis, who is a VP at iFood Decision Sciences, and Beth Olson, the Director of Education and Food Safety at Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. With that, I'll turn it over to Minos and Beth.
Good morning. Thank you, Allison, and thank you all for joining our webinar. By way of brief introduction, I started in the produce industry first with Dole Fresh Vegetables in Salinas, where I managed the fresh cut salad group. And then I started a much smaller grower shipper salad processor in a company in the Oxnard region of California. I sold my interest in that company to my partners, and for the last 15 years or so, I've worked with growers and with technology firms addressing the needs of the fresh fruit and vegetable industry. Beth?
Thank you, Minos. It's great to be here with you guys. So as Allison was saying, I'm with the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association, as well as with our membership solution for food safety, which is called Produce Food Safety Services. So I've been with the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association for 15 years now. Before that, I actually worked with the tomato co-op as Director of Operations. It was a bit of a baptism by fire, but there I learned firsthand working with growers and understanding how all the different growers came together with different perspectives and different goals and objectives. Worked with ICE directly, which was always a fun and interesting experience. And then I worked with our shipping office. And so on top of all of that, we actually implemented a food safety program. And this was early in the food safety world. So then coming to Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association, I've spent the majority of my career on farms and in packing facilities across the United States, mainly in the Southeast, helping educate one-on-one on the farm, in the packing facility, what a food safety program is, how to write SOPs and paperwork and checklists, how to train your employees. And so much more. So I've been able to work with the government and several of our larger fruit and vegetable associations in helping craft or maybe help keep the regulatory guidances in some semblance of lines. So it's exciting to be here. It's exciting to be able to talk about this very, very new perspective that FDA has rolled out and how we might be able to use it on our farms and our packing facilities to actually leverage a stronger organization and even potentially a stronger business. So thank you, Minos.
Next slide, please. So iFood Decision Sciences was founded in 2013 and has been a leader in food safety and quality data management in the fresh produce industry. Thanks to our knowledge and expertise in produce, we've become a resource in developing both state and national food safety guidelines. HarvestMark, which was recently acquired by iFoods, has provided traceability and quality management applications for almost 15 years. We work across the whole fresh food supply chain with hundreds of customers worldwide, tracing billions of products each year. The iFood Decision Sciences company now provides integrated real-time traceability, food safety, and product quality management tools. Beth, next slide, please.
Thank you. Yes. So the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association was established back in 1996 by Georgia produce growers. They felt like they needed representation, and they didn't feel like they had enough time to come off the farm or come out of the packing facility to make sure that they had that representation. The things about Georgia is we don't have very many state-specific regulations that we have to abide by. So majority of our work when it comes to regulatory and government affairs is actually in Washington. So there's much more of an across-the-board approach for the produce industry than it is just Georgia or just Southeast, although that's typically where our voice lands. We do want to be and consider ourselves the united voice of the Southeastern produce industry. We do have about 500 grower members. And so back in 1999, it was when food safety really started to show up. And so we had some growers come to us and say, hey, I've got a grocery store buyer or a retail buyer that's asking me for a food safety audit. Number one, what is that? And number two, can you help us out? So we were able to work with and collaborate with the University of Georgia, the Georgia Department of Agriculture, and Georgia Crop Improvement Association to create something called the Georgia GAP Food Safety Program. So we actually created all sorts of SOPs and checklists and things of that nature, and began to offer some food safety audits there. So then back in 2011 was when the Global Food Safety Initiative really hit. And the whole landscape of food safety really changed. It had already begun changing, but it really did. There was a mandated pivot almost. So that's when we pivoted as well and changed our scope and perspective and approach and started what's now called the Produce Food Safety Services. So we provide customized food safety programs, develop food safety programs, analyze existing food safety programs, SOPs, offer education and consulting. It's a nationwide where we are literally from coast to coast and border to border. Again, most of our time is spent in the Southeast, but I feel like we're more and more on airplanes these days. So I'm excited to be here. Next slide. So one of the reasons that we are here is that taking back even more from the slide that we're looking at, back in 2011, Congress passed the Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA. Those of us in the biz who are in the know, we call it FSMA, Minos. And so through FSMA, that was Congress directing FDA to write rules and regulations. And really, it resulted in the biggest changes in the food safety and food regulation that we've had since the early 1900s. It was a huge shift. FDA didn't have a ton of control over timelines and even some of the content, but they did have some control over implementation, or rather over interpretation of those rules. But their feet were really held to the fire by Congress. So coming back to what we're here to talk about today, about a month or so ago, FDA, maybe a couple of months now, FDA rolled out what we now know as the new era of smarter food safety, and it's a blueprint for FDA's future. It's not a new regulation, but it is something that FDA is hoping to use as they continue to implement FSMA rules. Next slide, please. So as we're looking here, this is really what they're trying to do, and what we're going to focus on today is the tech-enabled traceability. There are 4 different components to this, and if you go to the FDA website and or if you just Google smarter new era for smarter food safety, it will take you to the FDA webpage. There's a really good quick read, about 3 or 4 page document that overviews what the blueprint is. And there's also a video that several of the commissioners and deputy commissioners put together that roll this out and kind of give a little bit more background on it. So I definitely encourage everybody to go there and to look over it. It'll take you less than 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes to do the whole thing. But what we're here to talk about today is the tech-enabled traceability. And this does not necessarily mean that we can't use paper anymore on a day-to-day basis. But what it does mean is that FDA and our regulatory body or bodies have been looking at past outbreaks and past regulatory issues. And they're finding that they nor the industry have really been embracing technology. We're in a new millennium. And with such, there's so much data and there's so much technology and there's so many ways that we can make things smarter and not harder. And so one thing that FDA really is trying to do is streamline processes. And ultimately, their main goal is to provide more public safety. In order to do that, they feel like that there can be better ways by implementing technology to identify outbreak sources, identify potentially contamination sources, be able to have a quicker recalls, not only within the supply chain, but then also from the chain, from the retailer, wholesaler to the consumer. So that's ultimately what they're trying to do. So the other piece of this that has just been rolled out that undergirds a lot of this is part of the FSMA rule, or the FSMA rules, the FSMA mandates, was to release a traceability rule, which was just given out, or the proposed traceability rule was just given to us last week. Minos is going to go over that shortly. And so I think Minos, thinking about FDA wanting to streamline, FDA wanting to create this tech-enabled traceability, enabled data sharing. I think you nor I are going to be surprised if we begin to see blockchain come into the conversation. It's not there yet, but we won't be surprised if that happens. And then also this transparency that the regulatory bodies are really hoping to have, not only from the regulatory agency to the industry, but also industry to regulators. As you've read over this 199 page, I've got it right here, 199 page proposed traceability rule, what are some of your key takeaways?
Thank you,
Next slide.
Beth. Yeah, and hopefully we won't be talking too much about blockchain, just because the tools are there right now to meet the FDA requirements without requiring things like blockchain. We're still talking about
agree with that.
paper records at some level, and thank you. And but paper records. So although these paper records are still allowed by the FDA, I think one of the key points is that companies should start to maintain digital sortable records so they can submit them electronically within 24 hours of a request from the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA is suggesting that all food businesses maintain their traceability records electronically. The truth is that nowadays it's probably easier to keep digital records than it is to keep them in spreadsheets or on paper and then stored in binders. There's still a lot of details to be worked out.
Yes.
The exact record keeping requirements are subject to some interpretation, and they'll be worked out in the next couple of months, definitely with industry input by folks such as yourself and Produce Marketing Association and United Fresh and so on. Next slide, please.
Well, and Minos, as you get into this next slide, I think that is one of the beautiful parts of this regulatory process, is that we do have a proposed rule, and we are reading it and we are digesting it from that standpoint of what is this actually going to mean for our farms and for our packing facilities, for our distributors. That's my focus, but then also for our buyers and for our wholesalers and retailers. And so the beauty in all of this is that this is the proposed rule. It's just the first draft. And so now we as an overall organization, we as an overall industry, as well as consumer groups and others, have opportunities to submit comments to FDA for several weeks, several days, several months. They then take that information, they digest it. Most of the time they come back with a final rule. There are the rare occasions where there's a second draft and you get a second opportunity to make those comments, but that's the beautiful part that you just really highlighted, in my opinion, is this is proposed and we are still understanding it.
Definitely, definitely. And I just wanted to clarify here, you know, we talked about electronic sortable spreadsheets, which are being requested, and you know, while paper records are still allowed, our point of view, food decision sciences point of view, is that digitized data will be necessary to meet FDA's goal of expediting the identification of traceability information when in the case of threats to public health. What I mean, what the difference is between digitized data and electronic data, as I see it, is that digitized data enables you to enter data once and to be able to access it in real time, to sort and to analyze the data, and to view multiple records and details immediately. Electronic data, on the other hand, usually, at least in my mind, refers to data stored as PDFs or in emails, you know, which are difficult to sort, to combine,
Yes.
and to analyze. And that's the difference. Next slide, please.
Absolutely.
So while the proposed requirements only apply to those called high-risk foods on the food traceability list, they're designed to be suitable for all FDA-regulated food products, and the FDA is encouraging the voluntary adoption of these practices industry-wide. This list was generated by a risk ranking model, meaning that the foods that are perceived to be the riskiest are on the list, and the ones that are perceived to be less risky are not. This is not to imply that foods such as watermelon, bell peppers, and cucumbers are inherently risky. What this means is that the frequency of outbreaks and occurrences of illnesses, the likelihood of contamination, the consumption rate and the amount consumed of these commodities was high enough to put them in a riskier category.
Absolutely.
Does that make sense?
It does. And so as we can see on this slide, so many of our Southeastern commodities are listed here. We're already doing in meeting all of the regulatory requirements. And then we're also doing and meeting usually the higher requirements from our buyer, from our market. So, you know, as we look through this, this is what FDA is proposing, or these are the commodities that FDA is proposing that this requirement, this traceability requirement apply to. But I think as we have seen with other industry groups, such as the Leafy Greens Marketing Agreement, this is FDA's approach. Typically with something like this, you will see the market take a different approach, which is, hey, that's actually a good idea. And whether you're on the list or not, I want you to do it. So having the difference in perspective and understanding of a regulatory application versus a market-driven application, I think we're going to see this go across the market if this continues.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, could we have the next slide, please? I think we might have frozen a bit. So my objective on the next slide is to try to get some perspective on the progress of traceability in the produce industry.
The slide is up.
Are we looking? I'm sorry, I'm not able to see it yet.
Minos, we're looking at the history of the Produce Traceability Initiative slide, the one up, one back requirement. So if you want to just speak to that, I think everybody can see the slide.
Oh.
Okay, well, why don't we give Minos just a moment to log back in here.
Thank you. I can hear you, and I apologize for the drop. Can everybody hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Yes,
Wonderful.
we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about
Great.
that. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of perspective on the progress of traceability in the produce industry by looking back almost 15 years ago, when the Produce Traceability Initiative, or PTI, was developed following the E. coli spinach crisis back in 2006. The entire industry got together and developed developed this standard, the PTI standards, including the one up, one back standard, which we're all familiar with. Next slide, please. The most visible sign of this effort was the harmonized label and its components. There's a unique number. Can everybody hear me, or am I frozen again?
We can hear you.
Thank you. So there we go. That's the slide I wanted to see. The most visible sign of the PTI effort is the harmonized label and its components. It's a unique number at the very top, which identifies a harvest date, a lot number, a harvest location, and other information a producer may want to include. The label is both machine readable or scannable and human readable. The voice pick code on the bottom right corner is an alternative.
Okay, it seems like Minos is having some trouble. Let's give him a moment to log in. Minos, are you back?
I apologize again. I'm not sure exactly what.
We lost you at voice pick code.
Yep. Sorry about that.
I tell you what, if we continue to have problems, you could always call in.
Okay.
And we'll go from in that direction.
We'll do that. We'll do that.
Yeah.
I'll do that. And again, I apologize. So the voice pick code I was saying at the bottom right-hand corner is an alternative means for lot level tracking without having to scan cases. Beth, yesterday we were talking about that most self-respecting growers, shippers, and processors will tell you they've got good PTI compliant one up, one back lot level traceability.
Yeah.
Why is the FDA getting involved? What are your thoughts?
So the one up, one back has always been a regulatory requirement, not from a necessarily a food safety standpoint, but from a food defense standpoint. So that was already in the Ag Bioterrorism Act from years and years ago. We've simply adopted it from a food safety standpoint so that we can not only meet the Bioterrorism Act, but we can also use it and leverage it from a food safety standpoint. I do think that it's enough, and I tell you, I was relieved, I guess, to read in the rule, and I'll admit that I haven't made it all the way through, but relieved to hear and to see that we're not really getting away from one up, one back necessarily. that's still the expectation, to know one step where it came from and then one step up where it went. So FDA getting involved is, I feel like they're already involved, but it will probably be nice from an overall industry standpoint to have a little more standardization. When we have attempted this across the industry in the past, it was actually the industry itself that couldn't get on the same page. As marketers and buyers would come up with a requirement, those that I primarily represent downstream, which again are the grower, packer, shippers, those are the ones that really had to implement the PTI changes, only to find out a few years down the road that the retailers weren't actually always implementing it. Some of them took it and have held on to it and are moving forward, where there are others that aren't. So organizations like HarvestMark and others like them make PTI compliance easy. It's very much attainable. And so again, having software and technology enabled organizations already at our fingertips, it's probably one of those, and there's no probably, it's a little bit of a scary thing, because typically the agricultural industry is slow moving when it comes to adopting new things. Bottom line is, change makes us nauseous. We don't like change. We want everything to stay the same all the time.
It's true. It's true.
But knowing that we're going to be asked and encouraged and nudged to adopt technology that is ultimately going to come through those regulatory pipelines, it is good to know that we're going to have at least a couple of years before all of this is required. And that 24-month period that's being proposed right now will not start until we get a final rule. And the draft rule, the proposed rule, was just given out. So we've got some time. So those early adopters of technology, when it comes to digital data, not just electronic forms, but digital data, and those that are going ahead and moving forward with traceability solutions that integrate, they're just going to be ahead of the curve, in my opinion.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Beth. Next slide, please. One of the reasons you folks want to be ahead of the curve is that, the produce industry, as we all know, is a complex industry. The standard traceability offering of one up, one back, unfortunately creates data silos at each step of the supply chain, sometimes, up to 5 or more silos. What that means is that most companies have great internal traceability programs, but not external traceability, going 4 or 5 steps down the distribution chain, from the grower to the shipper, to the broker, to the wholesaler or distributor, to the retailer, to the store, and on to the consumer.
Yep.
So, and unfortunately, more than a year ago, the FDA said that these internal traceability programs just aren't enough. They said, when you look at how other industries digitally track the movement of planes, ride sharing, and delivery of packaged goods like FedEx, it becomes clear that we must explore how these types of technologies could improve tracking when it comes to food. In part, this is what's led to the FDA's Smarter Food Safety Initiative that you spoke about, Beth. And honestly, what does that mean for the folks listening in on this webinar, for the audience? Yep. Next slide, please. So in the spring of 2018, just 2 years ago, and 12 years after the spinach crisis, romaine lettuce was implicated in 172 illnesses and 1 death. Officials were able to trace the problem to one growing region, but it took them months to pinpoint the exact source of the lettuce. Meanwhile, prices for romaine dropped by more than half. Grocers nationwide cleared it from shelves in thousands of stores and faced lawsuits from customers. Howard Popula at Kroger, one of their vice presidents, said it cost his company millions of dollars. Growers and sellers of romaine said that 2 months after the crisis, sales had dropped by 45%, And not just romaine, but overall leafy green sales were down by more than 27%.
Yeah.
On top of that lower volume, whole head romaine prices tumbled as much as 60%. But it's not just the growing industry that suffers. A series of food safety crises in 2015 cost Chipotle the Mexican food company, cost them $25 million in fines. It resulted in a decline of 37% in their stock price and 3 years of reduced earnings growth. Chipotle's brand perception trended down for years after the recall because of consumer concerns with food safety. This is why the FDA is pushing new rules. The expectation by the FDA is that a grower, packer, shipper, wholesalers, retailers, and distributors should be able to trace the product they handle back or forward in a matter of seconds. So the specific grower responsible for the outbreak is identified, and they don't drag the rest of the industry down with them. Next slide, please. But it's not just about compliance with FDA rules. Trade buyers and consumers will buy brands they trust. Consumers want to know if their food is safe. Given a choice, our research shows that 83% of consumers say they would choose traceable produce over a non-traceable item. If you're a grower, why wouldn't you make sure that you're offering your customers and your customer's customer a product that you know they want at a very low cost to you? Next slide, please.
So Minos, one of the things that comes to my mind as you say that, though, is goes back to PTI and the original question of, what are my thoughts of the FDA getting involved? And so I guess I would ask you this question, especially as you're going into this next section. What should a traceability solution look like that not only allows us to meet the requirements and demands for our internal programs, internal traceability in systems? It meets the FDA regulatory guidance, but it also meets our market demand so that we know what's in the coolers, we know where it's gone, we have that information. So I feel like it's not an impossible thing to do, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you. And the growers need to keep their major customers happy. They need to stay on top of technology. They need to look ahead of government regulation, and very importantly, without breaking the bank, because everything that they do,
check.
we're in a low margin business. So we need to be sensitive to that.
Yeah.
Next slide, please. So a grower will need the basics. They need to choose a technology vendor who complies with GS1 global standards. That's the universal standard of communication between buyers and sellers, and company-specific case label requirements. The grower needs to make sure that all their harvest, packing, and processing workflows are supported, because as we know, the fruit and vegetable industry is made up of many unique industries, and expertise in one does not mean expertise in all of them. A tomato grower has completely different requirements than a peach grower. And so whether they pack in the field or in a packing house, whether you grow and harvest berries or tree fruit or leafy greens, the grower needs to make sure that whatever traceability company they use, they understand their specific processes. Next slide, please. So, and whichever company you choose rather, should also help you generate not just case labels, which has been the standard until now, but also PTI consistent pallet labels. Next slide, please. So what the pallet label does is record the GTINs and lots from each case that as you're building a pallet, since many shipments are often from multiple lots and multiple harvest dates. This pallet label provides what's called a serial shipping container code, or SSCC code. And at the time of shipment, you enter the customer ship to information for inventory tracking in and out of packed inventory. This is what enables us to trace forward a shipment. It gives you the ability to know where specific lots or products with specific harvest attributes went. Because you may harvest 100 cases of corn, but only 40 went to this particular customer. How do you know that it's those particular 40 that a customer is having a problem with and not the other 60? So that's the purpose of this SSCC pallet label. And finally, all this data needs to be on the cloud, because that's the only way for instant trace back and trace forward across the supply chain. You know, you mentioned blockchain earlier, Beth, and yes, it's gotten a lot of press from large companies with tons of money to spend on marketing. The truth is, we have the tools right now, and we can accomplish the ability. We can get product tracked in a matter of seconds, as Frank Yanos of the FDA has talked about, with existing technology. We don't need to go into fancy blockchain technologies and things like that. These technologies exist now, and they're cost effective. So what the point is going to be is that by bypassing paper records and Excel spreadsheets, and by making specific trace information available both to your own company and to your trading partners in a matter of seconds, will happen by putting that data on the cloud. So in summary, the traceability system should be a platform for case labeling to enable trace back, pallet shipment tracking to enable trace forward, all hosted in the cloud for instantaneous trace across the supply chain. This will help lower inventory management costs and ultimately improve your relationship with your receivers. Next slide, please. So I hope you agree with me, Beth. At the end of the day, it's not about the technology.
Yeah.
It's about public health. It's about consumer confidence in our product. And it's about addressing the business problems we're trying to solve.
I agree that at the end of the day, that is the whole point of all of this, and working through the exercise. I think right now, we're not at the end of the day. We're at mid-morning coffee.
Yes.
From an industry standpoint and from a proposed rule standpoint. So I definitely think that this is going to be what we all come together and we rally around. So I think now organizations like the Georgia Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association and larger organizations like United Fresh and PMA and Western Growers and Florida Fruit and Veg are going to work with individual growers and packers and shippers and retailers, as well as solution providers like iFoods and HarvestMark, to find how we can respond to this proposed traceability rule. How can we take what we already know? As you're saying, the technology already exists. So how can we take what we already know and what's already available to us and make this work within a regulatory framework that fits and that works for all points across the supply chain? So we'll get there. We will get to that end of the day, and we will march hand in hand and arm in arm, but we definitely, we're ready to, and I know Minos, y'all are right there with us. We're ready to read this and respond and let FDA know where they knocked it out of the park and just did a great job in some areas that they really need to do some improvement on. I do not fight or disagree with the fact that we definitely need to move in a more in a stronger technology fashion across the entire agricultural industry. That's nothing. It's an area that's always been that's been ignored for a long time. So it's It's going to be how that is encouraged and how that is, how it is pushed. And I love the fact that, again, we already have those solutions. So this isn't necessarily anything new. It's just the fact of what's it going to look like. So thank you, Minos, for today. Thank you for including me in this conversation. Allison.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you both. And why don't we go ahead and open it up for Q&A. So audience, if you have questions, please enter your questions into the Q&A feature in Zoom. Okay, we'll give everybody a minute or so to enter their questions.
You know, my mind continues to go, as we're waiting, my mind continues to go back to electronic records versus the digital data. And I'm thinking through conversations that I've had with other members and clients of Produce Food Safety Services. And it's amazing how organizations, software, tech-enabled organizations like iFoods and others like it, and HarvestMark and other traceability solutions like HarvestMark, really do take that data, that day-to-day data, and it makes it easy. That's one thing that I continue to hear across the board, and this isn't necessarily a plug for any one organization, but across the board, I continue to hear it just makes food safety easier on a day-to-day basis. And then the information that I have seen pulled out, the reports, it definitely makes the trending, understanding the trends and finding baselines and even identifying potential issues in an area, it makes it so much easier and quicker. And you're not opening up a 3-page or a 3-inch 3-ring binder and looking through months and months of paper data to try to figure out what happened and when it happened. But being able to pull up a chart, something as simple as a chart, and be able to, oh, this is what was this? You know, we've already talked about this. We have addressed this, whatever this example issue is. Let's go back, because now we've got an issue that has come about. So let's see if there was something that dealt with this data point that's outside. So,
or to your point, enable us to go back a couple of years. You know,
yes,
it seems that the Romaine crisis 2 years in a row happened right around Thanksgiving. What is it about Thanksgiving? Is it the transition from north to south, from Salinas to Yuma? Is it specific feed?
Oh, Minos, you froze up there. So if you want to call back in, just dial in.
Mm-hmm.
If you can hear me.
Well, and I think Minos's point makes an excellent point. And I think that those types of points are what I know our industry, we meet on a very regular basis. Industry associations across the country come together to have these conversations. We also then meet with FDA on a very regular basis to have these discussions. And so I think that FSMA really moved FDA from a very reactionary standpoint to more of a preventive approach. And so I think that freedom, and I think some changes in the leadership have really kind of it almost empowered them to go and to have some freedoms, such as let's create an initiative, a blueprint, such as the new era of smarter food safety. There are consequences to every decision, and not all consequences are bad. There are some very positive consequences. So let's see, we have Allison, do we have any questions?
Yes, we actually do have a couple of questions. So the first question is, the data we are gathering is binary, safe or not. Do you see value in gathering qualitative data? If yes, how can this be used to improve business performance and consumer satisfaction?
Interesting that you ask this, because one of the four aspects of the smarter or new era of smarter food safety actually deals with behavioral science. So FDA, this is kind of going around the question, and then I'll come back. I love to chase a rabbit. But one of the things that FDA wants to see is, from an organizational standpoint, how can we as growers, packers, shippers, retailers, distributors, but each one of those organizations, how can we take food safety training, data, SOPs, and things of that nature, and not only do our typical trainings that we always do, but how can we go a bit further and implement things such as that will impact behavior. So how can we reward people? How can we make people excited about food safety? How can we empower people to take on this cleaning SOP or this instruction or this traceability and actually begin to take it on as their own almost? And so to get back to the actual question, that data is binary, whether it's safe or not, absolutely. And gathering qualitative data, I feel like there is a value, whether it is from a regulatory mandate or not. I definitely think that there is a value there for an organization to be able to look at. And how can it be used to improve business performance and customer satisfaction? So, whether it's, again, my focus is much more of that grower, packer, shipper. And so is there a harvest crew that is traditionally, when the product that they are harvesting goes through a packing facility and has a traceability or has any traceability on it, and it goes out and it may be kicked back or rejected, is there a way to be able to say, hey, this continues to be, we got another rejection because of size or wilt or whatever it may be, and we don't necessarily think that I'm not going to get on that right, but so can you look at that information and that qualitative data that you may be keeping to potentially link it back to a harvest crew that may need to be retrained, or packing facility employees that may need to be retrained, and then ultimately, I feel like that will, with this example especially, that will improve your customer satisfaction. You could potentially have less rejections if that's what you're beginning to see, or consumers that are literally calling you saying, this is wilted, what do I need to do? Well, I really can't help you at this point in time. So, but there may be less of those phone calls. Minos, are you back? Great.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, I'll stay off video. I know you guys love looking at me, but I will I will stay off the video. To add to Beth's point, I think tracking qualitative data and over time, there is significant benefit, because
Yes.
what you want to aim for is continuous improvement, right? We did a good job this year, but let's see if we can do a better job next year on
Yes.
the basis of our past performance. And
Yep.
I think that's one of the key advantages of gathering qualitative data and tracking it over time. And that ultimately will improve business performance and consumer satisfaction.
Minos, I feel like you really underscore something that we've begun to see our grower, packer, shippers do a better job of. But for years, we kept records and we collected data simply for the fact of achieving a food safety audit checklist, or achieving a regulation or a mandate that a buyer had given us.
Correct.
So what are you going to do with that data? I think that's what every organization has to ask. And I know a lot of grower, packer, shippers don't feel like they've got the time. But ultimately, if you've got the data, you now have resources that you can look at, potentially analyze, and analyze is a big word that scares some people, but it's just looking at the history. You know, what does it continue to show? If pest control is such an easy example, and I love easy, so let's go in that direction. So from a pest control standpoint, is there an area of your facility that always has hits in your pest control system? And then asking the question, well, why? So physically going and looking around, and is there a trash can there? Is there a door there? Is there are the coals right outside of that area? Is the trash dump, or I had children. My mind doesn't work all the time. What is that called when you put trash in a big container?
That would be the dumpster.
Dumpster. Allison, you win today. So is the dumpster right out there? So again, just a really easy example, but take that data and actually begin to use it, again, to this question's point. Whether it's qualitative or whether it's quantitative, use it to your advantage. Use it to improve in all areas of your business.
Great points. Thank you both for that. So we do have a couple of other questions. The next question is, Minos, this is for you. How long does it take to implement a solution for an average sized grower shipper?
So specifically for traceability, an average sized, we'll say there's one distribution center or one warehouse, one location. We can do it in a matter of minutes over the phone. It's a very, very simple application. We can train you in less than an hour or two, and you can be up and running in less than an hour or two.
Thank you, Minos. We have another question as well. With all the data points from the field to pack house, then through the distribution chain to the consumer, how is this being aggregated in the cloud?
Great question. Great question. Minos, do you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. You know, we live in an era of being overwhelmed by data. This information, you know, we have the databases and the resources to keep track of information and data and keep it separate. And when we need to, we can combine it, evaluate it, analyze it, and it's very, very straightforward. We can you know, go into detail and offer folks who want to look at this information distinct roles, so that, you know, certain roles are able to see the entire distribution chain. Other individuals can only see their specific area of interest or responsibility. So this is one of the advantages of advancements in technology that have taken place over the last 10, 15 years.
From my perspective, in looking at this, not from a solution provider such as Minos, but more from that regulatory perspective and from just an overall industry perspective, we are already seeing where there's organizations that are being able to take this information and it's already in a cloud. I was very pleased to see FDA address the question or the issue of privacy and how to contain who can see what data at what point in the supply chain or in the chain period. So it was good to see when they first rolled out that this blueprint for a new era of smarter food safety. That is in there. I have not, again, completely finished the traceability system or the traceability proposed rule, but I can only believe that that's going to continue to be a point that FDA is at least going to consider. I don't know how it's going to look once it's implemented, but I feel like there's a commitment at this point in time to work with the industry and to come up with real solutions that can be implemented, not just pie in the sky. So we all know that is it Deputy Commissioner Frank Giannis? He is a blockchain man, and so again, whether we're taken in that direction or whether we're able to use existing technologies, I think that this, it may not be the exact answer to the question that's being asked, but it's nice to see that our regulatory bodies are at least considering it.
Thank you, Beth. And that's it for questions. So Anna Laura, if you could move to the next slide, please. Thank you very much. So I want to thank both of our presenters today, Minos, Athanassiadis, and Beth Olson. We appreciate your perspective and your insight, and we encourage you to learn more about tech-enabled traceability. And you can do that in a couple of ways. Please connect with us at PMA Fresh Summit, October 13th through 15th. We hope to see you there. And also, the United Fresh webinar series is hosting 2 webinars on traceability part 1, where Minos will be a featured panelist, and that's on October 27th. And they're also doing traceability part 2 on November 5th, where the FDA will be talking about the proposed rule change, and our chairman and founder, Diane Wetherington, will also have some input into that webinar as well. So I want to thank everybody very much for your time and participation today. We hope you learned a lot about tech-enabled traceability. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. And please look forward to seeing the webinar recording coming your way by email tomorrow. Thanks again, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Minos.
Thank you, Beth.
Bye-bye. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.